Welcome to the Circle 31 podcast. I'm your host, Ayana Robinson Dixon, and this is the Love Series. My guests today are Dorian and Tanjarae Porte, and this conversation is built around mental health, safe spaces, and self-awareness in our marriages. This is such a great conversation to have as believers. Here is my conversation with Dorian and Tanjarae Porte.
My name is Dorian Porte, and we are from Memphis, Tennessee, but we reside in Nashville. We've been residing here since 2014. Professionally, I am a transportation coordinator with the Kroger, and also in my spare time or off time from my full-time vocation, I am a baker. And I am starting up my own company or my own bakery, which is TripleDsBakery. And we have been married since 2014. So that would put us right at
9 years. Yep. So my name is Tanjarae Porte, and he told you where we're from, Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised, but we live in Nashville, as he mentioned. I currently am a teacher in a kindergarten through fifth grade charter school. However, I do have my own consulting firm, a Cultivated.Connections design and consulting, where we support arts educators with, just being awesome and surviving and thriving in the school system. To piggyback off of him, yes, the 9 years of marriage, but we've been together 13 years as a whole.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
That has been a joy and journey to be in a young marriage and thriving. Just our shoulders off for a minute there.
Well, Dorian and Tanjarae, I'm so excited to have you with us tonight on the Circle 31 podcast. Welcome.
Yay, thank you.
So I'd love for us to just, have a conversation about marriage and allow our listeners to just benefit from your experiences and I'm sure be blessed by what you all will share tonight. So my first question to you is, how can couples who are in a courtship, engaged, or married create safe spaces for effective communication? Because during this series, that is one reoccurring theme that has been coming up is communication and how important it is. And we do have everyone listening, people who are not yet in a relationship, people who are in a serious relationship but not yet married or engaged, and then those who've been married for quite some time. So could you share with us how do we create those safe spaces?
That's one of our favorite things, in my opinion, to chat about. I would definitely say, at least for me, I believe the first way to do that is one by being transparent and vulnerable about self first, and owning your traumas and doing something about it. Because if you don't feel safe with you, how can someone else feel safe with you? Or how can you create that safe space in the midst of like inner turmoil? Like, you can't do that. That's just my opinion on the first step.
Okay.
I would definitely say the second step is creating that safe space does have to be a focal point. I don't think that's something that can come out of thin air. That is a conversation that would have to be had with both of you. The second thing I am going to piggyback off of her so far is doing something about trauma or anything that, maybe impeding in your relationship. But to me, the biggest thing that also ties into that is being self-aware and also making your partner aware of those things that you are self-aware or that you are becoming self-aware about if you're doing the work. I would say I've definitely had an awakening like the past 2 or 3 years of becoming more self-aware about who I am, what I am, what my flaws may be, how I can work on those, and how that does affect my marriage and my relationship. So that is something I am continuing to work through. But I do believe that it has may enhance my marriage for the better.
I definitely agree with that. A running theme that we both have figured out or found out that has been true for us is like ownership and acknowledging, like owning our stuff, right? owning the flaws, and acknowledging that although that wasn't our intention to make our person feel that way, it still happened, and it still made him feel that way or her feel that way. I would also say a thing that we did back in, was it 2020? I want to say it was 2020. Could have been 2019. I nicknamed it the Red Table Talk because our dining room at the time had red chairs. So I nicknamed it the Red Table Talk. And it was just one of these moments where it was 2020. We was kind of talking about safe spaces, especially during the turmoil that was going on in the world during that time of, I'm married to a whole beautiful Black man. And, I expressed that one particular day of, my fears, and him being the amazing man that he is, he was like, I'm good. I'm going to be good. And I was like, I get that, but this is how I feel about it. And I need a safe space to express that. And so we went on this journey of expressing what does a safe space look like. And we hit a red table talk and kind of just chatted about that. Right. And we created like a whole list of things, like of what to say, not necessarily what to say, but how to be a support to one another during that time. Like myself, I go from 0 to 100 real fast. I know that about me. And I also had to own the fact that I can't talk sensibly. I'm just going to own it when I'm super emotional or feeling super raw about something. So we had to, that's one of our rules of like allowing processing time. Does it always happen? No, but I can definitely say, at least my opinion, my perspective, that it has made us better. What would you say about that?
I mean, I agree. I believe that it has definitely improved how we actually have dialogue with each other and how we discuss certain subjects. I think we both have to pull back because we are so, how do you describe it?
Passionate.
Yes. We are both very passionate. When we get passionate about subjects, we can't hold back on cutting each other off because we have instant, but hey, we'll have a revelation right there in a moment, but that person isn't really finished talking about their point. And so we both get irritated about getting cut off, but we both understand it. So in that sense, we're the same person. So we just have to do like self checks on it.
And not getting offended when somebody like, I didn't get a chance to finish, or can I speak?
Right.
I mean, it happens, like, although we've grown in this space of communication, it's not perfect. We do cut each other off. That still happens, but it's not as intense as it maybe used to be.
I think it's only intense when we're not agreeing.
Yes.
We're not saying
I agree with that.
But if it's like a friendly debate where we're not really agreeing about something, it's not a big deal.
Right.
But even then it just gets kind of laughed off. But when it's a serious conversation and we're at odds, or we're not seeing eye to eye, that's when it's an issue. But we both understand it. We don't hold it against each other for the most part.
Not now.
So I mean, in order to just thinking about and processing what you both have shared so far about your relationship and how you communicate, how you create safe space for each other, and even witnessing your interaction, looking at your body language, and even it's really easy to tell you guys know each other very well. You seem like you're very much alike in many ways as well. So what I'm thinking is, you guys are intentional about creating that safe space, and you both mentioned doing the work, the inward work, in order to make your relationship work and for it to improve. So it sounds like over time, it wasn't something that was instantaneous, but month after month, year after year, you guys took something and said, okay, we need to get better at this. We need to get better at that. So it's a healthiness in your relationship that I'm observing. So this leads me to my next question. Because in order to have a safe space, that inner work has to happen, right?
Yes.
So what does mental and emotional security look like in a healthy marriage? And is that connected to the inner work that each of you are doing?
I definitely believe that mental and emotional security looks like, for me, just being able to have a place or a haven of vulnerability. Because what I had to acknowledge in my marriage and how I used to carry myself when she would try to be like that with me, I had to acknowledge that I grew up in an environment of invulnerability.
That's powerful.
I grew up in an environment where if my emotions were acknowledged, they were acknowledged in a negative way. I was always, not always, but there would be times where I would be condescended for crying. So whenever she shed tears, I would not acknowledge it, or I would try not to. And I had to realize that was not okay. And I had to realize that was generational indoctrination. It wasn't right. So once I actually gave myself grace for the fact that I carried myself like that based on my upbringing, I had to acknowledge that and do away with it, and had to understand where she was coming from in a lot of places, at a lot of times. And in doing so, that in turn allowed me to open up and be more vulnerable with her.
Dorian, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So you, at the point of acknowledgement, what was the motivation to go from acknowledging to saying this has to change? What made you make that decision?
The fact that I want to have children and I don't want to pass that same doctrine down to them.
That's awesome.
Yep, he said. Yes, he said a whole lot right there. That's why I love this man, because I love his way of with words. Like, it's just amazing. I would definitely say the inner work for me had to be done, just due to, like, we all as Black people have this generational trauma within us, right? But it wasn't until we moved here and, I was away from my little safe haven of my family, because we're really close, where I had to, like, find myself in what that meant. As a wife, as a teacher that couldn't find a job here in Nashville, like, it was identity issues. So I was kind of forced to, like, find yourself, girl. Because as a wife, like, there's a whole identity situation going on. Now you are a new being, in a sense, literally. So new social security card, name, everything, right? So my inner work started a lot. I won't necessarily say it started a lot earlier in our marriage, but it kind of did, in a sense. And there was a moment I was watching Ilyana Fix My Life. I love this show. And she was asking the young lady, why did she react to her spouse at the time the way she did? And when she went on this journey about her trauma and her childhood issues, it was like an awakening for me of, like, man, maybe I am holding on to him, or, doing these different things to him because I have a fear of abandonment. Like, that's a legit issue. Or was an issue of abandonment, whether it's through someone physically leaving me or someone dying or this, that, and the other. Like, there is so much trauma that I've had to grapple with, personally throughout my childhood, that it has legit, it changed the way I thought about people. Like, I wanted to hold people on so close that it crippled me, in a sense. So that was the start of the inner work. But I would also say letting go of the Black woman being strong syndrome, because that's what I saw. I was raised for the majority of my life by my grandmother, who was this pillar of strength. Like, she still is this pillar of strength, along with the other matriarchs in my family. Like, you know how it is. Just these big, beautiful pillars of strength, where it was I hardly ever saw vulnerability from specifically my grandmother. I hardly ever saw moments where she cried or just let this cape flow and go down. So when I got to those moments, it literally would take me, I would have to crack and break for me to see those, for him to really see those moments, unless, you know, I'm really, really frustrated and tears start falling. But that's not sad. That's just, I'm pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the emotion that's leaking out of my face. And by that time of where I'm cracking and breaking, he don't know what's going on because I haven't expressed it, said anything about it. I wasn't vulnerable ahead of time to let him know, like, I need you at this end versus this end, and you're catching this end, the extreme end of it, and you don't know what to do. And of course, because you don't know what to do, I'm feeling rejected. Yeah, he will freeze.
And I'm like, I'm not sure where all of this came from. I think I know the root cause of it, but how did we get here? And I think that's what I used to mentally process. Like, I don't, like,
what do you want me to do?
It feels like we went from 0 to 60.
Mm-hmm.
Sure how we got here.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that, but it took some reflecting of, T, how is he supposed to support you in this if he don't know what happened in the middle? So that inner work definitely, and awakening definitely helped with asking for emotional support and telling him what I expected of him, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, I can't give him support. He can't give me support if I don't even know why I'm jacked up.
Yeah, that's good. You went like deep. I mean, Dorian went deep, then you went deep. I mean, then he went deep again. I mean, y'all just unpacked a whole lot of stuff. I mean, I don't even know where to go from here, because you talked about the matriarchs. Dorian talked about growing up and not feeling validated to express his feelings. And we, but listeners, we know that, many times when boys growing up, they were told not to cry, be tough, that kind of thing. And then women, we know we all have the strong grandmama, aunties, etc. So we everything you said just hit so many points that I think we go day to day living our lives, and we don't, some of us, I shouldn't say everyone, some of us don't stop long enough to process what we grew up in, how we grew up, how we were taught, and how that is translating into our lives today as adults. And even if we are working to change it, if we can acknowledge where it started from, it'll make that process so much easier. So I said all that to say thank you for touching that point, because it's not talked about often. And I know that our audience is going to be blessed by it, because now our listeners are reflecting on their childhood, how they grew up, the people that, they looked up to, and what kind of messaging were they receiving as children, and how does that translate now in their relationships. So all of that just kind of opened up so much for us. So thank you for even going down that road. But in that, one thing you mentioned, Tanjarae, wanting to be a support to Dorian and being available to be a support to him, and him being a support to you. So my next question is, why is making one another a priority important in a marriage? And the reason why I ask this question is, there may be someone listening, maybe they're newlywed, maybe they've been married a long time, but although they are married, perhaps they're still operating as if there's no one else for them to consider, if that makes sense. Mm. So could you guys talk to us about why it's important to make your spouse your priority?
Mm-hmm. Are you looking at me?
Oh, okay.
You can take the lead, boo. I'm good.
Ooh, that's a big juicy one. Priority in a marriage. Well, first and foremost, like, this guy is my best friend. I literally have known him since we were 16. Like, he helped me pass chemistry. Like, legit. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have graduated if it wasn't for him.
Awesome.
So, for me, that has a big reason as to why I tried my best to make my husband a priority in my marriage. Is one, I don't want to ever lose my best friend. Point blank in the period. Like, yes, we're lovers and all these things. We have this beautiful life planned out if God sees fit to have it that way. But ultimately, he's my best friend. Like, we do everything together. Forget the girls. I want to hang out with him. For real. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the biggest thing of, like, what what was the foundation you were built on? Like, if you don't keep that, it's pointless to even be married. And we always say we got married to stay married. I'm not doing this again. Point blank.
Amen.
So we either got to make it work or we got to make it work.
Either or. Either it's gonna work or it's gonna work. One of those.
Yep. Like the kids say.
For me, I think it's about satisfaction as a whole, from a conscious standpoint and just from a union standpoint. Like, if she's not okay physically, I could be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that even if the bills are paid and yada 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 and everything else is taken care of, something's wrong with her, then something's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for me. You know, another example, just dating back to the major example that my parents had said. My mom dealt with a lot from a health standpoint, and my dad was in tip-top shape, but he took on a lot, making sure she had everything, making sure that she was like, I didn't see a lot of my dad when my mom's health began to fail. And I knew exactly where he was at, and I knew exactly what he was doing. But to be able to have a front row seat of that, it gave me the perfect blueprint of how I should be taking care of my spouse, to be honest with you.
Wow.
I agree with that.
Wow.
And just to see them two, like, watching them at one point in time when my mom was in the hospital, I didn't see my parents anymore. I just saw two people that were married that were literally just trying to be there for each other. And so it was, you know, that left me with a lot in how I want to carry my marriage.
And I definitely agree with that. I've had the pleasure to witness that beautiful marriage of his parents, and of course my parents as well. And to see how his father, like, legit
dropped everything,
you know, other than job.
Right? He's still working full time, but he literally created the flex. Because I mean, he had been with the county for so long, to the point where he could do his job when he needed to do his job, but still be there for my mom. But it got to a point where he was not at work. Like, he was at home and at the hospital and wherever else he needed to be in the name of my mom, almost at all times.
Yeah.
And even with him having two grown sons who had 100% flexibility to do the things that he was doing, we never had to worry about it.
Wow.
Yeah. 26 years of marriage. Like, oh my gosh. And I'm so glad I had the chance to have front row seat to that, a good chunk of our relationship. So yeah.
That's beautiful.
I love my mother-in-law.
That's amazing. So talking about being there for one another, making major life adjustments to support your spouse. And Dorian, you said, you know, observing that, and in Tanjarae, you had a chance to as well. And you said it gave you a blueprint. That is so beautiful. And, you know, in thinking about what you just shared with us, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, being there for one another. And in order to do that, I think it has to start at some point of doing some type of inner work so that you're available for your spouse. You know, without knowing, you know, all of your dad's story, I know there had to be somewhere within him, he had something to pull from to be there for your mom. You know what I'm saying? And so bringing that point up, I wanted to ask about the role that mental health plays in marriage, because, you know, in order to be there for someone, and to be that pillar, or to be, you know, because in a marriage, you don't know which one of you is going to have to be the one that the other one needs to lean on. I might need you. You might need me the next. You just don't know, right? So please share with us what your thoughts are on mental health and the role it plays in a marriage.
Ooh, it plays a big one, honey. And people don't talk about it, but it plays a major role in marriage, in relationship. Prime example of us expressing a little bit earlier about how I personally used to go from 0 to 100. Yeah. And I didn't understand that. I didn't know why. But I do know and have expressed to him, throughout our relationship of like, I've always suffered from anxiety, even as a child, like legit almost run out of the school, like that. It's always been around. Just because I knew how to deal with it didn't mean he knew how to deal with it. Yeah, that was a big one, was my anxiety. And then after losing my grandfather in 2018, I suffered from a really horrible depression. Like, it was horrible. Because like I mentioned earlier, my grandparents raised me for the good chunk of my life. So that was dad, right? He also had a relationship with my grandfather as well. So I personally, that was the biggest loss that I had ever had. Even though I've lost a lot of people throughout my lifetime, that one was, it was big. And because I didn't know how to deal with that and did not do what I needed to do to seek help with that at that time, it boiled over. And, I thank God for, being a hedge of protection over our marriage at that time, because woo-wee, it was bad. It was real bad. But, I finally had started going to therapy and whatnot, and it's a must. Everybody should go. That helped a lot, and where I actually had finally got the diagnosis of, yes, you have anxiety. You have severe anxiety at that. You just are high functioning. So it's one of those, if people don't know I have it, they don't know. Because I function very well when I'm anxious. It's really weird. But the depression thing, as Black folk, we don't like saying we are depressed or have depression or suffer from it, this, that, and the other. So for my therapist, well, it was before my therapist, actually our wedding officiant and marriage counselor, he was like, sis, you're depressed. Daughter, you're depressed. And I was like, no, I'm not. Da, da, da. I fought back. But when my therapist finally like said it, and she was like, no, you suffer from depression. You do. Like, you have to own it so you know how to navigate from that point. And it shows up in women different than it does in men, and other things. Once I owned that I had these things, I knew about the anxiety, but once I owned that I do have depressive moments a lot, and what that looks like and what those triggers were, I was finally able to communicate that to my husband of like, babe, I feel really anxious today. Now he knows how to handle me, versus like, he don't know anything. So he might say one thing, it don't mean nothing by it. And it sparks me off from here, even down to us as ladies, we had lady time, and I have a PMDD, which also is a whole nother journey within itself. And it affects your hormones so bad, your mental health so bad, that had I not learned about that aspect of my body and how it affects mental health, that, I wouldn't be able to express it to him of like, babe, I feel more anxious today than I have ever had. And he straight up asked, like, are you around your cycle time? Oh, okay, now it makes sense. Okay, hormones out of whack. Got you. I'm okay. These are not real thoughts.
Got you.
So just being in tune with myself, and knowing the things has helped, in my opinion, from my anxiety and depression aspect, helped our marriage. What say you, dude?
Well, let's say I mean, I think if I can talk to myself, it would definitely just circle back to the first point at the beginning, which would be being self-aware. And to me, that's in an entirety, even the person you used to be from the person you are now. And that's in preparation for the person that you want to be or going to be. For me, I had to acknowledge things that happened in my upbringing, in my adolescence, in my young adulthood. I had to acknowledge some of the things that were even said or done to me and how that made me feel. I believe that once I got married, some of the situations that had taken place or some of the circumstances that had taken place prompted me to externalize, if that makes sense. Once certain things would happen, I would get angry with her. But even then, I didn't understand where that anger was coming from. Then I sat down and I actually had to do some soul searching. Like, yeah, I might be mad about this thing in the moment, but why am I mad? Why did I get so angry? Probably because somebody got angry at me at one point in time about this. So once I acknowledged that, I'm like, all right, that's not right. Just talking back, just speaking back to the first point we made at the top of the conversation. Yeah, something I am seeking to do is to actually find a good therapist. And so I can actually speak through these feelings and actually process this stuff.
That's good.
At some point, forgive the people who I felt that, that passed this on to me. And, with that, I can't wait to see what, the man, I can't wait to see what holds me in the future as a man.
Me too.
But I definitely attribute a lot of our growth to me being able to step outside of self and look at this stuff. I count it as a blessing because most people aren't able to, or by the time they do, they realize that, man, my babies are fully grown. It's been 30 years in my marriage and I was like this. And it's like we could have had so much of a better life had I just had this awakening before the fact. And like I said, all of this is just me sitting with self. I haven't sat with a therapist. I haven't sat with a therapist yet. Something I want to do. But I just really thank God that I had the opportunity to see it for what it was, and then seek the help that I need for it.
And what I'm hoping and praying for is that, those who are drawn to this conversation, that as you are speaking and explaining, that others will start to become self-aware. And to just hear you say the words, I'm seeking a therapist. This is something I need. And Tanjarae, you said it's necessary. Find one. These are the kinds of things, that I know, at least in the body of Christ, we need to hear that. Like I've seen these shirts that say Jesus plus therapy.
Yes.
Amen and amen.
Yes.
I love it.
Amen and amen. Because, one doesn't exclude the other, and I just want to thank you for opening up that conversation. And I know our listening audience is blessed by what you both said. So thank you. I wanted to ask if you could educate our audience on neurodivergency. Talk to us about that.
Yes.
You're taking the lead on
Yep,
this.
I take the lead. So neurodivergency is basically all the disabilities or learning disabilities that you can even remotely think of: ADHD, autism, all those different ways of how your brain works. Okay. That's just a synopsis, a very quick synopsis. There's a lot of information out there. If you type in neurodivergent brain or neurodivergent thinking, things like that, it's a lot of material will come out of that. So I was officially diagnosed with ADHD back in 2020, was it? One of those, 2020 or 2021.
2020, that's when you started therapy.
Yep, I did. Yep, started therapy in 2020. So yes, it was 2020 when I was officially diagnosed with ADHD. I've always thought I had it, but of course, when you are a Black girl, they hardly ever diagnose you, right? If you are a Black girl doing pretty well in school, who is quiet for the most part, you're not seen. I wasn't in trouble in school. So it wasn't ever caught. It's like the daydreaming and going off to La La Land in my head, and the inattentiveness was never caught. Or the hyper focus, things like that. So it was, this is why I said go to a therapist, because had she not been my therapist, I probably still would be undiagnosed. So she was like, did you ever consider that you may have ADHD? And I was like, well, why do you say that? And she did, a assessment on me. And I also went to my doctor and got it confirmed as well. And she was like, yeah, you got it. Because you are able to bounce from one thing to another. And even like when I'm talking, I have to be very conscious about what I'm saying, how I'm saying it, because it makes sense in my brain, but it doesn't make sense to everybody else, right? Excuse me. So the reason why that one simple diagnosis has helped so much in our marriage was now it explains why, or one of the many ways why it explains why I go from 0 to 100.
Gotcha.
ADHD, you suffer from executive functioning skills or lack thereof. You suffer from emotional regulation. So now with this diagnosis, of course, I was a little bit educated about it because of my occupation. I'm a teacher. So yeah, you can see it on most children, physically see that this baby potentially has something going on with them. But in adults, it looks different because we have learned to adapt and mask the things. Right. So once I found out about it and I started doing research of like how it shows up in me, it shows up as anxiety as well. And it shows up as us having a very simple conversation, and then all of a sudden something has ticked me off and I have gone into left field, and now we're in a full-blown argument. And then once I've come down off of this adrenaline high, I'm like, oh snap, did I say that? Or I probably don't even remember what I said.
Yeah.
Right? Like blackouts, if you will, of conversation. Even something that is has been a blessing yet a curse in our marriage. It has been hyper focus. That is a symptom of ADHD. It's a blessing when I have to get stuff done, right? I can tunnel vision. Oh, I'm about to get this done. But it is a curse because there have been moments where my amazing husband has come to me and is like, babe, attention, please.
That's good.
Like legit. And I'm like, oh snap, I haven't hung out with you for real all week.
That's good. Yeah.
Oh snap. And I used to get offended prior to this diagnosis of like, but we were just hanging out on the couch, XYZ, da-da-da-da-da. We just did this yesterday, when yesterday was actually 2 months ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, because, you know, the lack of not being able to account for time.
Gotcha.
That's the thing. Like timers help me. Or either I will say, babe, remind me to do this. Or even something so simple as an order, because working memory is an issue. If I'm out, I'm like, you know, baby, want me to pick you something up to eat, or you need me to stop somewhere? And he'll say it on the phone of like, I need X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, got that. Text it to me.
Yeah.
Because I will forget it like this. And I had to be okay with that. That's just how my brain works. And as the older I get, then my working memory is just not what it used to be. And that comes with age anyway, but to have a brain that does what it wants to do when it wants to do it is also like situation as well. But it's helped a lot for me to express myself with him and express myself to others, even when those moments where I don't feel good about myself. Like there have been moments where I've literally cried in his arms of like, I don't like my brain. And he was like, no, your brain is beautiful and it's okay, it makes you. But that was a moment of like, yo, yes, it's a blessing, and yes, I'm hyper creative because of the way my brain functions. But those moments where I can't think straight or can't focus, or I get overstimulated and don't have the energy to be around anybody, even my husband, because my body is on fire of like my nerves are doing this. It could come between your marriage. So again, had I not had that diagnosis, I want to be able to say, babe, I don't want to be touched right now. It's nothing that you've done. It's literally my nerves are on fire. I'm overstimulated. So that's the gist for me.
Okay. No, you're fine. But no, neurodivergency and how it plays a role in my marriage is I'm actually married to somebody who's neurodivergent. So what that looks like from a spousal support, please educate yourself. Education will equal less frustration.
Oh, I like it. I love it.
Really, what I can say about that. That's the biggest thing I can say about that, because once she got diagnosed and she began to educate herself and she began to look into this stuff, that prompted me to do the same so I could support her with this. once I begin to understand her, a lot of frustrations almost dissipated in thin air. It's like, nah, this is literally who she is. Like, I might see clothes all over the living room. Hey, okay, you know, I might see doors left open and stuff. Hey, okay. I can't even get mad about it. Like, it's just, I understand who she is. I know what I married now.
Right.
So it's like,
That's awesome.
so it definitely like answered a lot of questions about some of the things that have taken place since we've been in relationships. And it's like, I can't get mad at, like, I still love this person. So there's no, like, I can't get frustrated anymore with this. It's just who she is. You know, she has her coping mechanisms of how she's dealing with it. Mm-hmm. As long as she's attempting to manage it, mm-hmm. there's no frustration that comes of it.
Yeah.
And she does a great job at that. You know, the biggest key of it, I think her managing it is communicating and being transparent with me, which we've already talked about. And the transparency just helps a lot. Mm-hmm. You know, because we're on the same page at that mm-hmm. point. So, I mean, that's pretty much the role that I play in being married to someone who is neurodivergent.
You both had a good foundation to build on. So that's thank you for sharing that. And our time is running out. Unfortunately, this has been such a beautiful conversation, but I'd like us to end on you sharing with us the significance of Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 and 13. And if you could share with us the significance of that scripture in your lives, that would be wonderful. You could do that for us.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So we're going to read it first. 12, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience.
Bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, you must also do.
Yes. So I actually wrote this scripture in our vows. We had to write love letters to one another and read them as our vows. And the reason why I put that in my personal vow was because that was everything he was. He still is, but at the time of our marriage at 25, he exemplified being compassionate, as you can hear it, kind, like one of the most kindest people I've ever met. Humble, like I really wish this dude would really own his power, because he's humble to a fault, but he's so powerful and so amazing. He's really gentle with me and everybody that comes in his space. But even seeing how gentle he was with his mother, like you could tell a lot about a man, about how they treat their mother and their aunts and the other matriarchs in his family. I saw that gentleness early, very early, and he helped me through chemistry, so he has to be patient. He's still dealing with me now and all my crazy. So
and verse 13 speaks a lot to forgiveness, which is something I've been very big on, I would say, within the past 3 years, because again, I've had to address my trauma. Mm-hmm. I've had to address some of the stuff that has happened to me, and that took a lot of forgiveness. Even people that were very, very close to me. Like, you couldn't tell that me and my brother had beef for years. Okay. Like my blood brother, somebody I grew up with. Now I talk to that man almost every day. Mm-hmm. And he lives in a totally different city, 200 miles away. Beautiful. Closer than ever. Mm-hmm. And that's because we actually had the conversation, and I had to forgive a lot of what went on with us growing up. The same thing with my father, love him to death. You know, we are still working through some things, but our relationship is a lot better than it was than when I was an adolescent and when I was a young adult. And even with her, you know, I understand the power of forgiveness now completely. It's something that creates balance, and it's something that can harmonize any relationship that you have with anybody, even your enemies. Mm-hmm. I mean, go back to the book of Genesis. You look at Joseph, man, his brother sold him into slavery in Egypt. But when they found out who he was and he revealed himself, man, he wept on his youngest brother's neck, and he forgave him and told him, go get my dad and bring him up to Egypt, and we gonna kick it.
That's what he said.
But that's the power of forgiveness. It's all through the word. So who are we not to abide by it?
Agree.
Beautiful. Well, Dorian and Tanjarae, this has been such a blessing. I have truly enjoyed this conversation with you both. I wanted to just give you an opportunity just to give us, each one of you just give us one nugget to end on. What would be the final words you'd like our listeners to hear from each of you?
Self-awareness equals peace in your marriage.
Okay. Be that one. I'm gonna say the one that's taking effect on me from 2020 up until now. You can't become the man of her dreams until you become the man of your dreams.
All right. That's good. Now, Tanjarae, tell our listening audience where they can find you on social media.
Yes, so you can find me at Cultivated.Connections on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the places is that across platforms. That's Cultivated.Connections.
Okay, and Dorian, when are you going to start when is the bakery opening?
Oh, it's open. You can actually find me on Instagram and on Facebook at TripleDsBakery, and soon to come my website, which will be TripleDsBakery.com.
Okay, so it's already up and running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So we got the bakery, then we're going to find Tanjarae online. So listen, guys, you are both such a blessing. I pray that God will just continue to use you to bless others, to help other people become self-aware, to acknowledge, their trauma, their past, and to be transparent with themselves and others. So we appreciate your presence here on the Circle 31 podcast and being part of the Love series. God bless you both, and we appreciate you so much.
Thank you
for having
so much.
us. God bless you as well.
That concludes today's episode of the Love series. We hope that you were encouraged and inspired. Visit our website at circle31internationalwomen'sministry.org to sign up to receive podcast updates. And as a thank you for signing up, you will receive the 28-day Love Series devotional guide. Check out our YouTube channel for the Love Series playlist. It's a collection of our guests' favorite songs. You can find us on YouTube at Circle 31 Women's MIN. That's Circle 31 WOMENS MIN. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Thank you for joining us today.